Good day, everyone. This is Pineleaf Needles, and welcome to DDO Players News, where we take a look at the latest news in DDO and here at DDO Players. And please welcome my co-host from Ravenloft, Dracula.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
And also, please welcome our guest for tonight, the community manager for DDO, Cordovan.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
And thank you for coming. And also welcome for his first visit here, staff content designer Knockback.
Hi guys, how's it going?
Everything's nice over here, and welcome to DDO Players News.
I was going to say, I think he's already in DDO by
Yes.
I live in DDO.
Yeah,
you
he
knows
knows more
DDO.
about DDO than anybody.
So,
Actually, that's sort of true, Knockback. Just to get into your bio a little bit, you are one of our longest tenured staff members on the DDO team, and you've been with the game since 2009, right?
2008. I came on at the end of Mod 8. And fiddling with the text for that was like the thing I did on my very, very first day. And it went out, I think, 2 days after I started.
Yep, we have similar devs that have been with us for longer technically, but they took a break, went to other projects, things like that. You are our longest consistent member that we have.
Yep, so, at the moment.
Yep, technically Kantani has the record because he was on the launch team. Yep.
All right, let's now head into the question we ask every new person who comes here, and that is, what is your history with Dungeons & Dragons? We'll begin with tabletop, and then we'll move into DDO.
So I first played Dungeons & Dragons tabletop like 3 or 4 years after first edition came out. I was in high school, and there were these kids across the street who wanted somebody to play this game with them.
Okay.
And they were younger than me, and it was very strange to, actually associate with them because they were younger. But this game sounded so intriguing that I had to give it a try. So that was my first encounter with it. And I dabbled in it a little bit, but didn't actually get back to playing tabletop until the third edition. In the interim, I played a whole bunch of Dungeons & Dragons video games. All the old Gold Box games.
Love the Gold Box games.
Yep, Baldur's Gate, etc.
All right, so you're like me and skipping second edition, it sounds like.
As a pen and paper player, yes. And
yeah.
I'm kind of happy I did.
It's funny, we talked to a lot of people, and a lot of people skipped second edition.
It's sort of like fourth edition is also a common one to skip.
It's like Windows versions.
Yes, like Windows versions, yes.
Cough, Vista. Cough.
All right. Then how did you get involved in playing DDO?
So I played a little bit of DDO when it was in beta, but didn't actually play it when it shipped, because I was busy working on, at a different company doing different things. But then I got an offer to join the DDO team, and then I, started playing. That was Mod 7, Mod 8. And the thing that I really liked about DDO back when I was first being exposed to it was that how unlike other MMOs it was in terms of having things like traps that meant something, individual dungeons with individual goals, and so on.
All right. Then let's head into the question of what exactly is a staff content designer?
The long and the short of it is I make dungeons.
Okay, you need a shirt that says that.
I make dungeons.
It'd be the coolest shirt ever. I make dungeons. Ask
I
me
make
about
dungeons
the dungeons
for a
I
living.
make. Yeah, exactly.
Katani can more truthfully than I say, though, I make dungeons and dragons. Because he made Search and Rescue. Anyways, I make dungeons. That means building what we call the shell, the actual physical environment, decorating it with little bits and pieces, lighting it, writing dialogue, putting down monsters, statting the monsters, making the NPCs do all the things they need to do. And then I do a bunch of other stuff, like deal with parts of the store. But basically, I make dungeons.
You make dungeons. All right. And is there anything else you want to add in this section before we head into the news?
You might be a little too humble to say it, but I also say you are sort of our resident keeper of a lot of the lore. When we have story questions, trying to put together the story of our next update, what happened in the past updates and that, you often take a lead role in doing some of the lore keeping for the game here. So,
yes, I often refer to myself somewhat less flatteringly as the lore Nazi. Because part of my job is making sure that we're all on the same page in terms of what lore we're describing for the game. But yeah, I'm the current keeper of that flame. So I get to worry about things like how do you pronounce Oglarosa, or I can't even say it.
How to spell Schindlerin.
How to spell Schindlerin, where various extraplanar beings could possibly be from, things like that.
That type of stuff, yes. Then let's head into our game news. And we have a bit of game news this week because Update 31 is on Lamania.
And the first thing we need to talk about Update 31, since we have two members of Turbine with us, let's talk about the name of this gnome work.
Oh, right.
Yeah, where did gnome work come from?
They're doing their gnome work.
So Gnomework came about because we were trying, this. Okay, so just to back up a little bit, Update 31 includes 3 free quests. So rather than say a formal adventure pack like, what you'd see with Ruins of Gianthold or Sharn Syndicate, that kind of thing. This is independent quests, similar to maybe what we saw in the past with Mirrodin Kobold's Delirium and
Acid Wit.
Acid Wit. I could never remember that one for some reason. So they don't have, they're not one story. They're 3 individual stories that are free quests. And so we were trying to think of, well, what do they have in common? And we realized that we were going for gnome NPCs. So since you were getting your quests from gnomes, it just kind of seemed like, well, we're doing, the things that gnomes want us to do. We're doing missions on behalf of gnomes. We're doing gnome work.
Okay.
Homework, gnome work.
Okay.
So there you go.
So these are the gnomes of Waterdeep. Yes.
Well, these are the gnomes of Ebra,
Eberron,
Stormreach,
true.
and Evening Star.
But ultimately, how did we come up with the name? There was a brainstorming session one afternoon, and we just sort of wrote down a bunch of names, and we're like, yeah, I think that might be the one, right? And so that's just sort of how it came about.
On that topic, sometimes these brainstorming sessions come up with great results, sometimes less great results. When we were talking about the what we were calling the Swamp Update, which became the Red Fens, one of the names I threw out during the brainstorming session was the Violent Fens, which everyone of a certain age would recognize as being a reference to a certain band. And it was meant to be a joke, and it almost went out that way because, the producers really liked it.
That would have been awesome. I kind of
had to grab a hold of them and prevent them from sending it out as the Violent Fens.
I'm already imagining that was probably Glenn, former music producer.
Glenn was definitely one of them.
Oh, that's awesome.
All right, let's then head into the Mania release notes, which go into what's available. You already mentioned that we have free quests. And what else have we got? I heard something about the Fighter Kensei tree.
Yep, those are probably the 2 main pillars of Update 31 here is the new free quests and an overhaul of the Fighter Kensei enhancement tree. Really, it's just increasing the power of the Fighter Kensei up in their DPS not insignificantly, and also potentially adding a little bit of self-healing on it as well.
All right. Now, what makes the Kensei fighter different from other fighters, since I don't do too much in fighters?
I don't have my lore knowledge with me, unfortunately. The Kensei is, I think more stats, right? So the Kensei has a lot of PR, MRR, tactics abilities. You can really up your tactics DCs in the Kensei tree. So particularly if you do a lot of like, say, trip, stun, things like that, this might very well be the tree for you. And how it differs, let's see, because the Vanguard tends to be a little bit more specifically sword and board. Or actually, Stalwart Defender's more sword and board.
Yeah, okay.
Vanguard's I don't know. How would you describe the Vanguard? I guess I have to look that one up.
I mean, Kensai is more slightly exotic weapon, not technically exotic weapons, but things like druidic weapons, crossbows, light blades, maces, clubs, picks, and hammers.
And I was right, by the way. Vanguard is indeed the shield one. That's the one that's got all the
Yeah.
shield enhancements
okay.
in it. Yeah.
As that sound, I would think that Stalwart Defender sounded more like someone who would do that.
Well, they have some too, but the Stalwart Defender is really one of our older enhancement trees. That actually even dates back to previously the original enhancement revamp. We had various Stalwart Defender enhancements in the game way back in 2006, and it was really a defensive stance that would really give you a lot of armor class back in the day. Now it tends to be a little bit more AC in addition to physical and magical resistance rating. So the Stalwart Defender is maybe a little bit more... I mean, we don't really do the Holy Trinity in DDO, but it's a little bit more of a tank-style enhancement line.
All right. I would have thought Sword and Board would be more of a tanky style, but okay.
Well, there are some similarities,
Yeah,
right? But the
similarities.
Vanguard tends to be about combat with the Sword and Board. So,
All
for
right.
example, you have a lot of shield bashes in your
Ah.
Vanguard trees, shield specialization. You're unbalancing enemies, shoving them down, making them, stunned, that sort of thing. So,
Okay.
while they both do probably use a lot of Sword and Board together, the way that you use that combination of Sword and Shield differs pretty significantly in the Vanguard as opposed to
All
the
right.
Stalwart Defender.
So one is so the Defender is using it more as a defensive item, while the Vanguard is more likely to use it as an offensive weapon in its own right.
Yeah, we have, enhancements in Vanguard, like Shield to the Face. It's typically not something that,
Well, okay. Seeing how I play a Warden in Lotro, which keeps on bashing every third attack they're doing is bashing someone in the face with a shield. I guess I could understand that. So then let's head into other notes. In the DDO store, you fixed an issue that could cause the DDO store to crash.
Yep. That was particularly related to...
Is that the Osmodian thing? Or
I think so. Osmium. It was
Osmium.
thing that one of our people was able to track down. One of our game platform folks actually was able to work on that. The same person who's working on that is also working on an issue with the DDO store, getting it to work effectively with some older operating systems, Windows XP in particular.
Okay. Drac, do you have anything in the update that you noticed?
The Flying Griffins and Umber Hulks are now found in Temple of Elemental Evil. So if you want to see the Umber Hulk and you don't want to run the new quest, you can go into Temple of Elemental Evil and find them in there.
All right. Now,
Yep. Yeah, they were always meant to be in Temple of Elemental Evil, but the Umber Hulks weren't done in time, so we really just had to flick a switch to get them back in. And that's the quickest place to... Well, I guess the quickest place to actually see the Umber Hulks is in Search and Rescue.
Yeah.
all right. Now, concerning the Flying Griffins, how are these different from the Griffins that are already in the air node?
They're really flying. That's probably a note that makes more sense to developers than to players. There's two different kinds of flying you see in DDO. One is like what the Mephits normally do, where they just sort of hover there.
Right.
And their distance from the ground never changes. And then there's things like the Abishai in the House Cannith quest we did recently, where they're up high in the sky and then they come down towards the ground. In other words, the distance from the ground changes. And that's what we call real flying in dev speak. The Griffins now really fly.
So the long and short of it is I probably didn't do my homework enough to when I was writing the release notes.
Well, that's one of the things where we write things in the notes that no one outside of DevSpeak could possibly understand what they mean.
Oh, I have no idea what you mean there.
Yeah.
No. So you basically, we believe they can fly. We're teaching them
Okay.
to soar.
All right. So, yeah, I know this. I sometimes have some of my colleagues wonder, okay, some of the things I write down as updates that I've recently made, and they're thinking, okay, now what's this in English? What's
To
this
be
in
honest,
customer
I
speak?
try, I even try to. One of the main things I do when I write release notes, and one of the things the community team has always had the responsibility of doing is doing our best to translate, the formal check-ins in our development process into something that does make sense. And sometimes we're more successful than others at that. But for the most part, I mean, I could really let me see if I can even find a really good one that really is not going to make any sense here. Well,
Well, while you're doing that, we'll go on here. There is some new hairstyles for human male characters, and the gnome are getting 6 new beards. So some more beards for the gnomes. Also, human male characters are getting several new beards as well.
There we go. Here's a good one. So, here's that DDO store crashing issue. Calling IRC response token AC string crashes the server if there is no token parameter in the response JSON.
I don't know what you mean. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds like a very specific way in which a developer may write something. All right, it's fix an issue where the projectile offset was incorrect for gnomes.
Yep, basically, if you have a ranged gnome in particular right now and you're firing a bow, you'll notice that the arrow doesn't entirely center correctly from where you would expect it to shoot with the bow and arrow. And we were able to make some adjustments there to just sort of make it look a little bit cleaner.
All right, and looks like something to do with volume here, volume sliders, group volume preference.
Okay, so one of the things that we were able to debut in the anniversary update here was volume sliders for party chat. By default, they don't display, although they did initially. But if you click on the little green speaker there, you'll see a volume slider that you can turn individual party members up and down if they're too loud or too quiet. And one of the things the community had asked us to do is provide even more flexibility there by adding a user interface slider in the audio UI panel where you can set that default amount. When we first rolled it out, some people, if you were in a raid group and you needed to turn everyone up, it was a little bit of a pain because you had to individually slide up a whole bunch of different sliders. But now what you'll be able to do here with Update 31 is just go into your audio UI settings, and there's a default slider there. You can turn it up to 100% if that's what you want it to be. You can turn it 50%, whatever works for you. And then that'll be preserved between game sessions so that when people join your group or you join groups, et cetera, it'll default to whatever you have it set at. And then you can make further adjustments as necessary.
Okay. Anything else you have to say, Drac?
That's pretty much, I think, it for the Lamanio release notes.
Then let's head into DDO Chronicle, issue 188. Where it looks like we've got a gnome on the cover.
Imagine that.
Wow, what a shock.
It's like a gnome standing in House Kenneth, if I am correct in where he's standing. In the community spotlight, Axel is doing a pretty cool little series of videos over on his YouTube channel. He is looking at the collective storylines of DDO. And I watched this video today, and it's pretty amazing, so I think everybody needs to go watch this. If you want to get caught up on the storylines of DDO, this is the way to do it.
I should go take a look.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah,
I believe you actually did help because this video series is based on an earlier forum thread video series where the person who put that together bounced a bunch of ideas off me that I asked you about to get to him. So you would be reading some of your own work were you to actually see that video series there.
Yeah, it's a really good video. He did a great job at it. Also, check out the latest episode, I should say, of DDO Cast. They are offering up tips and advice if you're going to run raids in small groups. And I do believe Bonnie Bew was a guest, and I can't remember who else was on that show, but that was another great episode of DDO Cast. Speaking of episodes, Damsels of DDO are continuing their Wolfpack invasion. And click over and watch that. That's the video we talked about last week where I was running with them, and we had the most epic party wipe ever. That was so much fun. I hope everybody watches that and enjoys that video because it was a blast to do. And the Shady Rogues are taking a look at the Faithfully Departed, which I fear saying this because I know the damsels are going to hear this and make me do it, but I dislike that quest so much.
You know, that quest gets a bad rap. I ran that just on the live stream actually here pretty recently, and it really was a piece of cake.
Well, I guess it's all right if you're very careful in what skills you use and you don't use a lot of AoE.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
but I guess it's not so bad. But
yeah, for those that are like, what? It has a failure mechanic. One of the few quests in the game that has a failure mechanic, which is if you kill too many of these certain monsters in the dungeon, then you can actually fail the quest, which we don't do very often. And that was, I believe, one of the first and perhaps one of the last to really have that mechanic.
Yeah,
so.
Arachnophobia, I remember, has one.
Oh, yeah, where you can't break too many of those sarcophagi.
Right.
Is what you talk about. Yeah, it's pretty much the same mechanic, I guess. But
yeah, we got rid of most of those when we went to free-to-play because it's discouraging as a new player to be trying your hardest and then to find out that you failed because you killed too many monsters.
That is, especially with a D&D mentality.
Yeah, it does. Sparing monsters does not come naturally to a D&D player.
This is very true. It does not. And finally, in our article this week, Jeff over at DDO Gamer is taking a look at an app that is being built where it will help you solve puzzles in DDO. Which I need this this app, because I am very bad at puzzles. So
yeah, I should say that app is actually being put together by a British lady by the name of Grimord. She does some live streaming on twitch.tv/Grimord, and she's pretty active on Twitter in particular. And she's the one who's really working to get this app put together. I think she's doing first on Android and then bringing it to iPhone, and it's really just a consolidation of most of the puzzles in DDO. So you can just sort of click on, I need to know the monastery puzzle, and it'll help you work through that and all that sort of thing. So it's not out yet, but it's in the works, and it's looking real cool.
All right. So therefore, what exactly is the screenshot of the week?
Let's see. Sam
Salamir prepares to fight the Lord of Blades. Ooh.
Let me look at it right now. Oh, yeah, it's just a picture of one from the start of the Lord of Blades raid.
Ah, okay. That's why I'm not too familiar with it. Okay. And, all right, Drac.
Yes, sir.
What is the worst thing about having the Storm Reaper as a roommate?
The worst thing about having the Storm Reaver as a roommate? I would have to say he is always knocking things over because he's so big.
He leaves his dirty socks in the living room, and when he leaves his dirty socks in the living room, those dirty socks become the living room. So.
Well, yes, especially when you consider the static electricity coming from them.
Oh, right. On the other chance, he can let you fly, so you got that.
Yes. All right, let's head into the store sales this week. What's on sale and what do we have looking forward to as a free sample?
We've got the free sample of the week through May 5th is the Gold Seal Elixir of Moderate Healing. You get 10 of those when you use the coupon code you can find in the show notes, 1 per account as always. Store sales, 35% off the Harper Agent Enhancement Tree, Stat Tomes, Veteran Status, and the classes, all at 35% off. So we have a really good sale this week.
And let's head into our site news, where DDO Players interviews Sean Merwin.
Yes, this was a really fun interview that I have a chance to do. And if most people, you may or may not be familiar with his name just by hearing the name, but once you read some of the adventure modules Sean Merwin has written, you will probably know who he is. He has done stuff like Halls of the Undermountain. He worked on Dungeon Delve. He also is writing a lot of the new Adventure League content. And he actually did the very first Curse of Strahd Suits of the Mist. So we talked about his process of writing adventures, how he got started writing adventures to the future of D&D. So it was a great conversation, and I think everybody needs to check it out because I had fun, and I think it was a great interview.
Did you say Suits of the Mist?
Yes.
Like Suits as in like SUITS?
Yes, as in
Suits probably as in cards. I'm
cards.
guessing.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I was just saying, I don't think you would probably want to wear a suit made out of
yeah. Yeah.
it wouldn't last very long, and then, ooh, would you be in trouble, particularly
Yeah.
if we're in a formal setting.
It's referring to the Taroka deck
Right.
in Ravenloft. So yeah, check that interview out, and thanks so much for Sean Murren for taking some time out and chatting with us.
All right, now it is time for us to have some questions for our staff developer here. And Drac, what questions do you have?
Well, I'm going to start with the chat room because people have been asking some questions, so let's get some of these out of the way. Looks like Brack Barefeet is saying, when will there be an introduction of new weapons, something like a whip? Because he has a gnome called Indiana Gnome, and he needs a fedora and a whip.
Well, that's a pretty great idea. I mean, I think, the ability to deliver that would certainly be something we'd love to do. I don't think we have any real plans, though, in the near future to release new weapon types. It's something that's a pretty significant undertaking. You wouldn't necessarily think it would be, but when you're looking at doing the animation work for all the various combinations in DDO, bringing a new weapon to the game tends to be a pretty significant process. I would never say never on anything like that, but I don't think we have any immediate plans to have a new weapon to the game. But if were we to do it, though, the ones we hear most often from the community is the whip. We often hear about spears, pole arms, things like that. So we're well aware that the community would love to see those things. It's just a matter of, if we were able to do that, and then when would we be able to do that?
Now, is there a slightly easier on the weapons that are... Because there are some weapons, I think, that aren't for PCs, but I think NPCs have, like the staff sling, for example.
I mean, yeah, kobolds have a staff sling, essentially.
Right.
So I am not the person to ask about these things. I make dungeons, not weapons. But
I still say you need a shirt.
Yeah, usually the issue for things like this is a whole bunch of work has to be done in terms of player animations.
Right.
And then hooking things up in such a way that players do damage when and how they should. Whereas for things like monsters and missiles in particular, it's way easier, at least if you have the animations.
Ah, okay.
Right. I mean, technically, if you think about the most recent kind of, quote, new weapon was our letter or envelope that you could chuck, but that was really kind of a retrofitted throwing dagger of sorts. So.
Right, exactly. So that was just a question of putting a letter look onto an existing throwing weapon as opposed to a whole new style, which certainly for something like a whip you would need a whole new set of animations.
Right, a whip with the whole... And I could just imagine if you had a staff sling, the next thing they would ask for were various types of grenades you could put into said thing.
Yes. And the ability to jump up on ledges.
Yeah, jump up on ledges, yes.
And then also from our chat room, Grass Kitch is asking, aside from the new dungeons, what are some of the older dungeons that you designed, Knockback?
So let's see. The Snitch, Come Out and Slay, A Study in Sable, Army of Shadow,
The
Missing. What was the one in House Cannith? I can never remember the name.
Did you Power Play? Blown to Bits?
I did Power Play. And I was actually referring to the Devil one we did recently with the Tiefling who clones himself.
Shoot, I should know I ran that ad nauseum.
Multitude of Menace.
Yeah.
I learned how to name things from Stan Lee, in case you can't tell. Those are some of them. There's a whole bunch more, which I can't think of off the top of my head. I worked on the Epic Shroud, not the original Shroud, but the Epification.
Those are some big names in there, though.
Legendarization.
So speaking of you creating dungeons, I want to know, how do you go about doing that? Do you have like a full plan of the dungeon in your head, how you envision it, or do you kind of just start with an idea and let it grow, or how exactly does that work?
Well, generally there's a brainstorming session where we're like, what will we do in the next update? And we get some general ideas together and parcel those out amongst the people who are making dungeons. And then from there, usually you figure out what the biggest problems are going to be. Like what are the crucial moments. I was about to use an example from the quest that's up in Lamania, but it's rife with spoilers. But, generally, you look at things like the boss fight. How complicated is that? Are there any new art assets that are needed or that you can fake by putting things together in strange and unexpected ways? And then you sit down and you make the shell, which is the physical environment, the walls and rooms. People often ask whether we use graph paper to do that. The answer is no, we don't, because the pieces we have don't necessarily line up directly with a uniform graph size. So we wing it more. And then you figure out how much time you have and do everything you can within that amount of time. So very few quests, if any, in DDO are actually finished. They're all just sort of escaped when we ran out of time.
Speaking of dungeons, you had a large role in our anniversary dungeon as well.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. That was largely me. It was started by somebody else, but then I took it over and finished her off. That was a lot of fun because we got to put in all those references to the whole entire history of the game. And indeed, there was so much stuff that we had things left over, and some of those show up in the dungeon I worked on for this update. Good intentions.
Ah.
But I won't tell you what because spoilers.
And speaking of those dungeons, on Lamania there was 2 of those, but you did say there's going to be a third one.
Correct.
So is there any hints on about that? Are you purposely saving that for...
really.
I will say it's about a gnome illusionist.
Okay.
A gnome illusionist who tells you a story. That much I'll
Yeah, the reason for its exclusion on Lamania wasn't really lore-based. It just had some significant kind of implementation bugs that we just needed to polish up, and it just wasn't ready for the time we launched it on Lamania.
And I know earlier we talked about the Umber Hulk is now in the new quest, and you can also find it in Temple of Elemental Evil. And that's a pretty iconic D&D monster. So what were your specific challenges you had implementing that into DDO?
He was actually one of the more straightforward monsters. The biggest challenge we had, honestly, was time, because we were trying to get him into Temple of Elemental Evil, and that was such a huge dungeon with so many moving pieces in it, and he was just the one thing that we couldn't make fit, just getting him in. The animations are tricky for a guy like him, because we don't have anything else really directly like him. People who are good at these things will be able to tell what monster we used for the rig, but in terms of the animations, they're very specific directions from the D&D lore that say, moves like a gorilla but is an insect. And so doing that was probably the toughest part.
And also, there was quite a bit of work on the confusion ability as well, because it wasn't quite ready for Temple of Elemental Evil, so we had a lot of back and forth as to what the confusion ability would be. We had some very ambitious plans for the confusion ability, and then it just ultimately came down to, well, do we want to have an ambitious plan, or do we want to have a reality Umber Hulk? And so
it became a question of, we kept putting off doing the Umber Hulk because we wanted him to do this really amazing thing. And at some point, the perfect became the enemy of the good, and we're just like, no, we will put out the Umber Hulk doing a very standard sort of Days type thing, rather than the crazy thing we originally had in mind.
The one thing that really surprised me about them is I actually saw them turn and start attacking another NPC.
That's right.
So the ones in Search and Rescue are what we call wild, meaning they are hostile to not just to players, but to other creatures not of their same species.
It was just crazy because I was like, oh my god, it's like attacking that other NPC monster. That's awesome.
Yep.
It like really surprised me when I saw that. I was not expecting that.
Yeah. I'm hoping we will be able to do more with Umber Hulks in the future. They're actually an interesting monster because, you usually encounter them just as, oh, this thing pops up from the ground and tries to eat your face. But they are intelligent and, have telepathic abilities, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. We do have some more from the chat and from the community, but do you have any questions you want to ask, Pine Leaf? We'll let you ask a few, and then we'll get to the others.
All right, I was wondering on the level ranges for the new quests on Update 31.
So they are different on Heroic. The one that is not currently released will be level 13. Search and Rescue is level 15, and Good Intentions is level 17. And we did that because we wanted to fill in some blank spots in the levels. Also, things like Good Intentions has to come after Missing in terms of level because it's set in the same place but at a different time. And then on Legendary, they are all CR 31.
And so that would be on normal. So 31
Yeah,
legendary
all these-
normal,
all these
32,
are normal.
33. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
All right. And I was wondering, I know they said that you've done a great deal in DDO, obviously, because you're one of the longest running people and doing stuff consecutive in DDO. Does that mean you've never worked on anything in Lotro or any of the other games done here at Turbine?
Not really, no. Pretty much because there's always been this giant pile of work on
DDO,
Yeah. You do have a history in the games industry, though, prior to your involvement at DDO. I don't know if you want to drop any names or not, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
Sure, so I'll drop the unexpected one first. Immediately before working on Dungeons & Dragons Online, I worked on Zoo Tycoon. So I worked on Zoo Tycoon 2, as a matter of fact, and various expansion packs, which draws a blank look from many people, but for people sort of in their 20s, they go like, really? You worked on Zoo Tycoon? Anyways. And then before that, I worked on Wizardry 8.
Oh, wow.
Which my title, I think, on that was Monster Wrangler. Where in addition to doing a whole bunch of the writing, I placed and statted every single monster in the game.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
That's
but
crazy.
that was easy and quick. Yeah.
Some people who've played Wizardry 8 might, come after me with pitchforks because of the way that certain things are statted. But
yeah. All right. Anything else from the chat room then?
We do. Dantel is saying one of his most favorite parts of DDO is the puzzles. So how hard is it to create new puzzle types? Glowy tiles are great and all, but he would like to see something more than just the glowy puzzles.
They're can be fairly difficult. The last real new puzzle type we came up with was the light puzzles from Thunderhome, and those took a lot more time than we expected. And even then, they're still sort of at heart very similar to the glowy puzzles. So coming up with new puzzle types is actually quite difficult unless you think of a clever way to repackage the old ones. Which is a long-winded way of saying don't expect to see like new puzzle types in the next update or the update after that.
And over on our site, I did put a post up, and we got several responses to that. Chris is asking, do you have any thoughts on updating the old feats to reflect the recent changes to the game? For example, like adding PRR to the toughness feat.
That would really probably be a question for someone, one of our systems guys. I would say in general, though, no. I think we're pretty happy in general with the state of heroic feats in the game. And toughness, adding PRR, perhaps PRR, MRR. There are other ways you can get that, and I think that we'll probably leave that. I just saw today someone had 427 PRR, and I was like, what? Really?
Holy
Gotta be
cow.
kidding me. So I think additional sources of PRR might not be coming immediately. But we're always open to ideas, right? So, I mean, if you, I don't want to totally just shoot down your idea. I mean, it certainly would make some thematic sense to have additional PRR in the toughness feat. So it's something we could perhaps consider in the future, but no immediate plans to do that.
And Happy L is asking, will there be any more new content in the vein of a study in Sable that is something more than just your simple hack and slash?
Yes, and maybe not. There will be things that are kind of sort of similar. Good Intentions is kind of sort of similar in that you do spend some time talking to NPCs. I don't know. Something like a study in Sable is probably by itself on a bigger scale than anything you're likely to see in the next couple updates. I would definitely love to do such a thing, but certain forces have to align in certain ways to make it possible. Pretty much, a study in Sable took a release and a half worth of time to make.
Wow.
Because of certain issues, like figuring out the whole randomized part of it. So, like I said, the stars have to align in a certain way to make dungeons of that scope, or say the scope of a Delirium, possible.
And we did have another question over on our site from Grasskitch. Were there any plans to add any additional sagas? The Trials of the Archons, Devil's Gambit, and the 2 legendary Veil quests, To Curse the Sky and Creeping Death, all had storylines that could be woven into the Eritrekos / Devil-themed saga. And there could be heroic and epic saga lines.
So I agree with those statements. There are many possible sagas we could do, and I have good news and I have bad news. The good news is we really want to do new sagas. The bad news is we never have time, where it's one of those things where, because they involve a certain amount of extra testing and a certain amount of risk because of the XP involved, etc., they demand extra testing, and that sort of bandwidth has been devoted to other things recently, like, say, Green Steel. So I can't tell you that we have any extra sagas sitting around in our back pocket, but I can tell you that we understand what you're saying. We agree with you. So we'll keep looking for an opportunity to actually get them in.
And if you guys in the chat have any more questions, ask them. We're going to be doing some more questions a little bit later in the show. But the final one we have right now for this segment is from Kyriakos. He is saying, any chances that we will get more Militia? She did set up the cliffhanger for us to chase her down to her home plane. Would be another good use for the plane's caller, maybe 3 quest flag to figure out what her home plane is, and a raid to take her down with a legion of other succubi.
That sounds like quite the plan. I will say there's definitely more Militia, but it's more in the nature of a guest appearance than a raid.
So are we ever going to find out what her true home plane is?
I promise you will find out what her true home plane is, but you won't actually get to meet her there for a while. Also, part of that is just scheduling in terms of other things we want to do first. Also, I think, Militia had a pretty good run last year. It's time for some other villains to get a little bit of time in the spotlight. She showed up so much originally because, she was associated with the Devils and indirectly with Eritrekos. And we wanted Eritrekos to have his gang, of sub-bosses. And she was the natural person to lead that gang. And then she came back for Anniversary because she, was such a strong personality and was such a perfect foil for Jeets. That we couldn't resist putting her into the Anniversary dungeon. But like I said, she's had her time in the spotlight. She needs to rest up for a while.
And where's she resting right now?
Waffle House.
That would be telling. You'll have to find out.
The home plane of Waffle House.
I tried, people. I tried. Okay, and like I said, anybody in the chat room, if you have more questions, feel free to ask. We do have another segment coming up for more questions and answers.
Then let's head into From the Dungeon. Magic: The Dungeons and Dragons Gathering. That sounds like a...
You see what I did
mouth-
there, Pine Leaf? You like that? You see? I mixed them together because they're two separate games, right? But that doesn't
Last
mean
time I heard.
that their multi-universes can't connect. This is very strange, but let me see if I can explain this somehow. Wizards is actually letting you bring Magic the Gathering, the plane shift of Zendikar, into your D&D 5e game. There is a 38-page PDF up on Wizards of the Coast site right now to where you could actually incorporate Magic the Gathering into your Dungeons and Dragons game. I'll just let that set for a second. If your mind's not blown, I don't know what it's going to take to blow it. It has major races, various monsters that you will find on the plane, and various ways you can incorporate the plane and Magic the Gathering into your tabletop game. Which I read it over, and they actually did a very good job at doing it. And the thing I found interesting about it is at the end of the PDF, there is a link to a survey you can take. And one of the questions they ask you in the survey is, what is the next Magic the Gathering plane you would like to see next in your D&D game? So apparently this is something Wizards is looking to do more of. And I did read on Reddit that a lot of people are speculating this is coming from the new president over at Wizards that we talked about, because he has a deep history with Magic and the gaming industry. And I know he's a big Magic fan, so a lot of people are speculating that's why this is happening now, because people have been asking for this forever. Why? I don't know. I don't know why you would want to do this, but it's a really good PDF, and they really did a good job of incorporating the two. And I could see where you could, if you had a decent enough dungeon master, you could incorporate it, and it would seem like it was meant for D&D originally, and it didn't come from Magic.
So, Cordovan, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm possibly just making this up, but back in the days of TSR, wasn't there a way to use Spelljammer to get to
sure.
the world
Mm-hmm.
to the world of Buck Rogers?
Oh,
which was also a role-playing game published by TSR.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Anyways, it seems like the spiritual successor to that.
Well, I mean, there's a long history. If you think about, say, Adventureland and Land Beyond the Magic Mirror being sort of a bit of a parody of, Alice Through the Looking Glass, that sort of thing, Alice in Wonderland, and Expedition Beyond the Barrier Peaks, adding things like laser guns and robots. There was Earthshaker, where they had a gigantic robotic titan that was attacking a castle. It's got that famous cover where the giant robot is smashing through a turret there and all that sort of thing. So there's certainly no shortage of sort of kind of cross-pollination with the D&D world in that. You tend to find, and I think that's what you saw here a little bit, it's not so much in the core rule books as it is available in other methods, like in this case, a free PDF on the website, just for those who would be interested in doing it.
Yeah. I remember a Dragon magazine article where a D&D group popped up into the starship for Metamorphosis Alpha. So, if you remember that.
I don't.
You don't?
I don't.
Okay.
Sorry.
Think of, ever heard of Gamma World?
Oh yes, I played Gamma World. Yes.
Okay. Metamorphosis. I think Metamorphosis Alpha predated Gamma World. Essentially, Metamorphosis Alpha is, think of it as a generation ship, a big, huge generation ship. Something goes wrong, and what happens to it is pretty much what happens in Gamma World. So it's a Gamma World inside of a huge spaceship.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
All right, then let's head into Pathfinder Adventures card game finally arrives onto tablets, iOS and Android. And why is this a good thing?
I had to update this article, actually, because when I first wrote it, it was only on iOS, but now it's on Android.
Okay.
We talked about this. It's been a long time since we talked about the Pathfinder Adventure card game was coming, and it got delayed, and then it got delayed again. Well, now it's actually here, and it's actually fairly decent. This is a free-to-play game, and if you're familiar with the Pathfinder Adventures card game, it plays exactly like the tabletop version does, which I will give Paizo a lot of credit for being able to do this, because a lot of the times when you see video games and iOS and Android games that are based on card game or board games, it usually doesn't translate well, but this one actually did. And the free-to-play model is not too bad on this either. What you do is you will get gold in-game for beating these scenarios. If you do it on normal mode, you get 100 gold. Heroic, you get 200 gold. And Legendary, you get 300 gold. And then you also, in the scenario that you're playing, certain things will get you gold. Like if you kill a monster, you'll get a gold. If you kill a henchman, you get 2 golds. And when you close the location, which if you're familiar with the Pathfinder adventure game, your whole point is you're trying to close locations on a map and search for a boss. You get 6 gold for closing that location. And then you can turn around and use that gold then to buy more characters, more decks, and more adventure pass. And there is just like any other, and I feel bad about saying this when I have 2 people from Turbine here, but when you have a free-to-play game, there's going to be a little bit of grinding. Sorry, I'm saying that with you guys on the call. But, so there is going to be a little bit of grinding to this. You can also, of course, just pay $25 and you can unlock everything with a quote-unquote season pass is what they're calling it. But overall, I think the model they chose for this is good. And if you like the card game tabletop version of this, you're going to love this because I was really surprised at how well that it translated. And we got a message on Twitter from City Plays DDO, and he got the Android version, and he said it was very, very buggy. And I did read that a couple other places. So apparently there's some problems with the Android version of this, but I have it on iOS on my iPad, and it plays well. I had one crash, and I think that was just kind of my fault because I had my iPad doing like 4 or 5 things at once. So I kind of think it was more my fault than the game's fault. But other than that, yeah, check this out. Like I said, it's free both on Android and iOS.
All right, and speaking of tabletop games, we are now heading on to the tabletop where Asmodee NA announces Zombie Road Trip survival game Route 666.
Okay, this has to be the coolest new game that's coming out this summer that I have seen yet. This is a zombie road trip game. So you're going to go on a road trip down the infamous American Standby, which we know as Route 66, but for the game, they changed it to Route 666. And as you're going on your road trip, you are going to be running into hordes of zombies. So
what a shock.
Your goal is...
So you're not a group of zombies going on a road trip.
That would even be cooler, though. They need to come out with an expansion where you are the zombie. That would be awesome. The goal of the game is you're trying to get to California unscathed. But you're not going to be doing it alone. You will have other people with you. And you might also have some people that you think are your friends that are not quite your friends that are in your party.
Is this a Shadows over Camelot style thing or more like Dead of Winter?
It looks to be, from the previews I've seen of it and some of the articles I've read, it looks to be more like a Dead of Winter. But it's got a lot of nostalgia feel to it because they're really playing up the Route 66, kitsch angle of it. So, and for some reason, the pictures I noticed on the article didn't show up. I got to figure out why. But the box itself looks like it's something straight out of the 50s and 60s. So they're really, really playing up the nostalgia angle on it. And this is due out around Gen Con, or actually at Gen Con, I should say. So I might have to check this out at Gen Con. And since we're going to cover Gen Con, I might have to do an interview over at the Asmodee booth about this, because this game looks pretty awesome.
All right, and...
Oh, and I forgot to mention, there's zombie meeples.
Zombie meeples.
Who doesn't want a zombie meeple, folks?
A zeeple.
A zeeple. I like it, Pine Lane.
A zeeple. All right, let's then head into Tesla versus Edison, powering up, now on Kickstarter. And what is this, an expansion to Tesla versus Edison?
You are very astute by guessing this is an expansion to Tesla versus Edison, because that's exactly what it is, Pine Leaf. And that was successfully kickstarted last year, and we did tell you about that, and we actually talked to them at Gen Con last year, speaking of the aforementioned Gen Con. And now they want to power up your game. It seeks to expand the game and make it a little even better with several new modules that you can add to the game. And also, it's going to allow you to add more players. So it's going to add a 6th player to the game. So you can now play 6 inventors at once. And it is actually going to bring in some new inventors, Madam C.J. Walker, which is the first female inventor they are going to be bringing into Teslaverse and Edited. And I don't know who Madam C.J. Walker is. I'm sure Pineleaf can probably tell us.
All I really know about that name is that she has got some buildings and landmarks named after her in Indianapolis. So perhaps she has some kind of ties to that city there.
That very well could be. That name did not sound familiar to me at all. But yep, and I know a lot of people were excited to see her in the game, so I'll have to look to see who she is. But yeah, this is on Kickstarter now. It's also going to add some new propaganda cards and some new AI decks. So it's going to make the AI of the game a little more difficult to defeat.
The source of all knowledge, Wikipedia,
There you
says
go.
Madam C.J. Walker is an African-American entrepreneur, philanthropist, and political and social activist, eulogized as the first female self-made millionaire in America. She became one of the wealthiest African-American women in the country, and that would have been late 1800s, early 1900s.
Yeah, and being a millionaire back in those days was quite an achievement if you didn't start out that way.
If your name wasn't Rockefeller.
Yeah.
So there you go. So yeah, look for that. That's on Kickstarter now. They have met their goals, so they're just doing stretch goals now.
All right. Then any more questions from the community?
We do. We have some from the chat room, and we also have some that up from our site. Let me pick one out here. We've got, and I also put some up on the DDO subreddit. So we got quite a few responses over there on Reddit. Why is the names gone is the person's name over on the subreddit. He says, can we put ETR at level 28 plus again instead of level 30?
No, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, you want to expand on that a little?
Well, okay. I mean, there was a lot of debate when we raised the level cap to 30 on that, where, when we initially created Epic Reincarnation, in the release notes, in the guide, and all that stuff, it was, there were big, bold letters in there. When the level cap goes up to 30, Epic Reincarnation will be at level 30. So from the very start, we did tell people that Epic Reincarnation is not something that happens at level 28 or level 26 or level 29. It happens at Epic level cap, and that is currently 30. So to be consistent with what we've been saying for years now, when we did raise the level cap, we did increase the requirement to go from level 28 to level 30. Some folks, gave us feedback basically saying, but that's more XP. I don't want to earn more XP to do my Epic Reincarnation. They're not wrong. It is more XP, and I do appreciate it. But, it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to have, okay, so Heroic Reincarnation happens at the Heroic cap. Epic Reincarnation would happen at the Epic cap, except there was a time where it didn't, so we kept it at level 28 because we didn't want people to earn more XP. So it's never really necessarily made a lot of logical sense in terms of the why there. But, at the same time, there are folks who enjoyed being able to Epic Reincarnate more frequently without having to earn the experience that they would need to get from level 28 to 30. And we appreciate that. But from the very start of the reincarnation system, it was made clear that when this goes up to level 30, that will be the new Epic Reincarnation. And so we were consistent with that when we did ultimately get up to level 30.
And Rihanna over on Reddit asked a great question. If you could change or add one thing, regardless of community feedback or development time, what would that be?
Oh, man.
I thought this was a great question, actually, because literally the possibilities are endless on this.
Every classic module in D&D. Yeah, there you go.
Mine is positively down to earth compared to that one. What I would change is I would reorganize where all the quests are in DDO, so that we actually had a sensible series of quest hubs based on things like levels, rather than the mishmash that we currently have.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something where, every so often we try and fix it, and then we do something terrible that breaks it. Like we're doing in this update, where you'll find high-level quest givers in the harbor, things like that. But if I could start from scratch, I would go back and make it all make sense.
And Robusta43 over on Reddit asked, are there any plans for any more interesting solo quest, like raiding the Giant's Vault?
No plans for it.
No specific plans for it. It's one of those things where we like the idea, and the problem is we have a hard time justifying it because we're like, this is a multiplayer game, and if other people want to play with you, are we going to actually stop you? There are going to be certain quests that are better to play solo or duo than in a large group, and there's going to be other quests that are the reverse. In principle, anyways, I don't know if anyone's actually tried testing this, but in principle, for example, Good Intentions is better to play in a group, but split up. It's sort of designed so that you can all go off and do your own thing and finish the quest more quickly that way. So different quests are going to work better for different party sizes, but we have a hard time justifying actually turning on the solo flag and saying you could only play this with one person. The reason raiding the Giant's Vault is that way, incidentally, is because it is so heavily reliant on jumping that what we don't want to have happen is somebody to get in there who is not good at jumping or isn't interested in jumping and be in there with somebody who is good at jumping and then to squabble about what's going on in the quest. So that one we said, we'll just make this into a solo quest, and that will make you can figure out for yourself whether you want to finish it or not.
And most, I think all of our other solo quests are typically, they date back to 2006, where they were considered to be largely, introductory quests to kind of get you into the mechanics of the game.
Exactly. That was the original intent behind Solo Dungeons, was to sort of get you used to DDO. But what we did instead of making more dungeons with the solo flag ticked is make a whole bunch of dungeons which you could play with a group of less than 6, which is now, most of the content in the game.
And then they also follow that question up with this one. Are there plans to add more quests that use non-combat skills as their primary mechanic? For example, stealth like stealthy in Repossession, bluff diplomacy checks in A Relic of the Sovereign Past are, for example, party crashers in the ballroom.
We love non-combat ways of resolving things, and we try and put them in where we can. Part of it is limited by the skills that are in DDO as opposed to D&D, and the way that they're implemented in DDO versus D&D, where people who have diplomacy are not necessarily the characters that have diplomacy are not necessarily the characters you would expect to have diplomacy in a pen and paper D&D game, or things like lore not being implemented directly in the game, although we do have a sort of proxy for it. So we try and put that in.
I was going to say, I actually think one of the new quests probably kind of fits that bill a little bit. One of the quests you worked on, you do have some kind of dialogue-based options and things like that as well. So there
are dialogue-based options, but I don't think any of them are actually do skill checks.
Yeah, you're right.
You're right. The other problem is, if you put something like that in, you have to have a plan that deals with not just the people who have the skill, but also the people who don't. So are you saying, what is the benefit the person who has the skill gets? It can't be they're the only ones who win the quest. It has to be something more modest. So, it takes more time and effort to figure out good ways to use those skills, which is why you don't see them as often as we would like.
Yeah, one of the ones I could think of and tricky ways of getting skills is the infamous level 4 quest you get as soon as you reach the harbor, where you have this guard keeping you standing in the way saying, what? Oh, saying, oh yeah, all these refugees, they have to pay I think it's a platinum each if they want to come through. And you have all these socials. My warlocks can complete the quest. No other, I don't think I managed maybe on a sorcerer. I don't think any other class has ever managed to do it on.
And that's a totally optional thing, right? You don't.
It's totally optional. And it's a quickie,
but it's kind of frustrating if you can't do it.
Yeah.
And furthermore, it's unclear whether you can or you can't. And in something like a pen and paper game where you're doing this sort of stuff all the time, or at least you are if that's the kind of player you are.
Right, yeah.
Your DM gives you a whole bunch of feedback about how good you are at this and whether or not you should keep on trying to charm everyone in town. Whereas that's harder for us to do because we have to write everything in advance and we can't respond to the players as they do things.
And then from our chat room, we do have some more in there. Brack Barefeet is asking, are there any plans for shorter dungeons? Because not everybody has 1+ hours of time on their hands.
So this is a tough one because one man's 1 hour dungeon is another man's 5-minute dungeon, and we see this like all the time. Part of it has to do with different how many times you've TR'd, say. Other things have to do with how much you enjoy smelling the flowers. You can play a study in Sable and take 2 hours doing it if you read all of the text and pay attention to everything that's going on. And you can do it in about 10 minutes if you zerg it and just kill all the things that need to be killed and skip all of the dialogue. So one of the quests, not the one that you guys haven't seen yet, is probably going to be a short quest if you're not the kind of person who reads all the dialogue. Whereas search and rescue is going to be longer no matter what you do just because it's got a lot of square footage and a lot of monsters in it.
I will say this, though. One of the things in the new update, at least one of the new Update 31 quests is there is a more straight-ahead path and then a large optional section that will provide some additional benefit to you. And the same kind of thing we did with Temple of Elemental Evil, for example, as well, in Part 2 in particular, and in Part 1 where you could explore or just do a straight path. Also, we did have this in mind when we did last year some of the Trials of the Archons dungeons. We knew that as we got toward the upper epic levels, the quests tended to be fairly long. And so when we were doing Trials of the Archons and that, we did specifically have a few shorter quests in there to provide that level of balance. I'm thinking of the Tavern quest, for example, in Trials of the Archons.
Right.
So.
Right. And likewise, yeah, there are issues with shorter quests, which is, shorter quests tend to be the ones where wave after wave of enemy attack you for 5 to 10 minutes. And some people love that sort of thing, and some people hate it. Other people love giant dungeon crawls where they wander off for hours on end. Other people hate that. So we try and give a selection of different styles. There's certain people, I remember, like the first message we got on a study in Sable was from a guy who just plain didn't like reading, and he hated it. And that was a perfectly valid opinion, right? Because there are plenty of dungeons in DDO and in D&D in general where sitting around and listening to NPCs is not something you have to do all the time. So we try and make stuff that satisfies different groups of people. In terms of short dungeons, well, like I said, yeah, one of the 3 free dungeons this time should satisfy that. And then after that, we'll see. And short answer is I don't know.
And for time purposes, we're going to ask one more question, and that'll be from the chat room. And I do have some other questions that were posted up on the site, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep those. And the next time we have some folks from Turbine on, we will get to those, or maybe I'll try to set up another little chat with the devs.
Well, we'll see if we can do maybe a quick round here.
Okay.
Just kind of a quick answer on some of these. Let's see.
All right, Grass Kitch is asking, last year Cordovan did mention that you might paint a new model on the Panther Companion, and when Shadowfell came out, that you could get for pre-ordering that. And then there was talk that the Alba Companions would also be sold separately. Any chance of those being sold this year, or any update on those?
If I said that the Owlbear could be sold separately, then I was speaking in error. The Owlbear was a pre-purchase exclusive on that one, I'm pretty sure. So I don't think it's realistic to think that the Owlbear Defender hireling-style Owlbear is something that we'll be able to bring back in the future. There was a discussion when that came out. It was actually, I believe it was Tolero that may have actually said that rather than me. but I would need to go back and check. At the very least, it was coming from her that, yes, we could do another Panther. We could not do the Panther that came with Menace of the Underdark, because, again, that was a pre-purchase exclusive. But we could do a different model, or perhaps some different coloring, like a Snow Panther or something of that nature. There was some discussion, I remember, late last year about the possibility of doing something like that. It's something that we don't have penned into a release update, but certainly is something that we could do in the future if we, if all things come together there. So.
And we did have a question over on our site about the new random loot gen. It's great for a diverse range that is possible on the items, but they would appreciate if you could address the absence of like disruption, smiting, everbright, pure good, underwater action. Is there any chance those could be added back into the loot table?
Probably our systems loot dev would probably be the one to really give a definitive statement on that. But I remember asking him about disruption and that sort of thing when the new random gen loot system came out. And the idea was to put that as a property that would be available in named items rather than random loot. So that was a deliberate change to do some of that stuff. Pure Good actually hasn't been in the game for a very long time. And Underwater Action, I think I just pulled Underwater Action just the other day from Random Loot, so I think that one's still in the game. But it's certainly something that we could do, yeah, if there's enough interest and feedback on that. But for the most part, I think that some of those things, I remember Disruption in particular and Smiting in particular, were deliberately removed from Random Loot so that they would be a special property that could be made available in named loot.
And then I have go ahead.
I'm just going to run through a few. Graskit also says, running any additional trading card events this year? Nothing on the horizon on that one. Any definite plans to introduce additional illusion spells? It's something we would love to do, but we have nothing to announce at this time about that. Are gnome slaying arrows dropping? No, but they probably should. Although you don't fight gnomes, really.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
PvP
They're the only
less
PvP
that.
heroes in the game. There you go. Are we going to make epic level versions of Vault of the Artificer's House C challenge rewards? Are they intended to cap out at level 20? Yes, they are intended to cap out at level 20. It is something, if we were to revisit those House Caneth challenges that, we could look at, certainly. Also, that's a question for Vargwheel. Sorry, I don't really know that one. Any comment on direction a crafting update would take? It's something that we've had quite a bit of discussion on the forums. I guess it's not worth getting too much into that. Direction on Caneth crafting is something that is just going to have to wait. It really is unchanged from what we were saying earlier this year regarding our plans for Caneth crafting. So that's really kind of where we are in terms of the what would it be, that sort of thing. I think that clears out the ones from DDO players.
Yep, that's it. That's all we have. There's no more in the chat room either. But I do have one more for Knockback, though. Mm-hmm. And this is going to be the toughest question I'm going to ask you tonight, I think.
Oh.
Out of all the dungeons you have designed, what's your favorite?
Which baby is the best?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Which kid do you love the best?
I was always tempted to say the most recent one. The one that I think is like the one that has the most effort in it overall is A Study in Sable. The one, though, that I always come back to is one of the very early ones I did, which was Come Out and Slay. And that's because for a couple of reasons. One, it was the first rooftop dungeon in DDO, and I was wondering if we could do something like that, and we figured out a way to do it. And players really responded to it, and that was great. The other thing that I like about it is that it's one of the smallest geographically quests in DDO. Like, I think Haberdasher is smaller, but not much else. But it doesn't feel that way. You really feel like you're out on the rooftops of Stormreach in this tiny little space. And that I thought, as a level designer, was cool.
It feels large.
Yep. But it's really just, it's a smallish house and a little tiny section of rooftops.
And it's also nice that you have that option to get help from one of the mob bosses.
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun to create those mob bosses and make them fight each other.
Right, and you say, do you want to get help from one of the mob bosses, or do you want all of the loot?
Yes.
All right, and we are caught up on questions, and that is it. So thanks, everybody, for submitting your questions. I'm pretty sure we answered all of them. If we missed any, I will go back and look through them and save them and ask them at a future time.
Perhaps you could harass us in our chat tomorrow. We are doing an Update 31 preview on twitch.tv/DDO stream. That begins at 5 o'clock Eastern. When this goes live on Wednesday, you'll be able to catch the archive on both twitch.tv/DDO stream and youtube.com/DungeonsandDragons/live. But if you're in our chat room today, and you want to stop by tomorrow, again, 5 o'clock Eastern over on our Twitch channel, we are doing our Update 31 preview. Knockback will be there. I'll be there. We're going to see at least a couple other devs should most likely be with us as well. And we'll have plenty of time to answer your questions there, too. So if you have a question that you just didn't get in on this one, that would be another place where you could ask it.
All right, then let's head into our week in DDO. And Drac, what were you up to?
Well, over on Argonescent, I have my Ranger, which is level 4. That is the one I created that I'm just doing wilderness adventure areas. Still in the Cerulean Hills, doing the Slayers. I'm 200 to 400, so I'm halfway there, and then I can move on. And then over on Wayfinder, my Ranger's sitting at level 7. I did the Harbor. Dirk's got a secret, did that on Elite. Tried to get a Muckbane. I did not get it to drop. Go figure, right? Recovering the last tome, did that on Elite. And I did Home Sweet Sewer. And then about the only other thing I did in game besides with you, Pine Leaf, is I did hop on Lamania and check out those 2 new quests. And I think out of the 2, Search and Rescue was my favorite. I liked them both a lot, but the only reason why I think I like Search and Rescue more was because that actually seemed like it was a dungeon crawl. It had a very good dungeon crawl feel to it, so excellent job on that. And I enjoyed the boss at the end. That was surprising. I was not expecting that. And then I was not expecting the boss at the end of Good Intentions either. We're going to keep it spoiler-free for people that haven't played it yet. But good job on both of those. So that's what I did this week. How about you, Piley?
All right, then we'll go to my Gnome, Warlock, level 6, that quested with you. And first we did a couple of House Beneath quests where we did the Grey Moon's Den, the Trollish Scourge, and then the Grey Moon's Den Extermination. I believe the next section of them were slightly higher level quests, and we had so much trouble finding the dungeon entrance that we just decided, okay, we'll wait a couple of levels.
Which quest?
Whatever follows the Grey Moon's Den.
Oh, like the Cult of Six one? It's just
Yeah.
If you basically think of Grey Moon as to the left, the Grey Moon starts to the left of the Ogre NPC and then moves to the right of the Ogre NPC. You'll find your way to the entrance that way.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. We should be able to find it now. That makes a lot of more sense.
Then after that, we hopped onto the Sharn Syndicate and ran on Elite, Stand Your Ground, and Dirty Laundry. Though we completed both quests, but our optional NPC died on us, so we didn't get full credit on that end. Then on my own, with my human gnome, I was running part 2 of the Temple of Elemental Evil. And this time, I got through the starter stuff. Okay, all that's fine. Then I got to the first node that was open up was the air node. And the air node, I always have trouble with the air node. I remember having a lot of trouble with back when I did it with Drac. That's why I got stuck on when I was trying it last week. So this started going to the air node and eventually wound up at the place where you go into the boss's lair. And I just said, okay, I've just spent too much time in this place. Let's just hop to the boss's lair. So I did. And the best thing I could say about how I did in there is I lasted longer than I expected.
And how long was that?
Ooh, I think at least a full minute.
Nice.
Hey, for you, Pine Leaf, that's not bad.
Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, I still got killed, of course, but I think I had her down to half or something like that. So it wasn't too bad. Okay, could have been better. Maybe someday I'll actually be able to finish that. We'll see. And therefore, Cordovan, you have anything to add for what you did this week? Or
I was actually quite busy this past week in terms of DDO stuff. I too did Temple of Elemental Evil Part 1 and 2. That was on the heroic side, and we did pretty good there. I ran Faithful to... I actually ran some of the... I guess you could say some of the quests that are both popular and least liked. I ran Tomb of the Tormented, Faithful Departed. I ran The Pit, and I ran the whole Necro 3 chain. And then raided just a couple nights ago Mark Death a couple of times as well. But yes, Tomb of the Tormented, and I did it on Elite, and we two-manned it.
Oh, good grief!
And I did all the puzzles myself.
Are
and
you
it
just
fine.
like wanting to like torment yourself? No pun intended.
Actually, let me tell you this:
in the name.
The secret about Tomb of the Tormented. Once you figure it out, it's a very quick XP run, and it has some of the best XP per minute in the entire game. Only, though, if you know how to run that quick. Once you figure out the paths and the mazes that you need to do and the exact order in which to do things, then you can breeze through it and get some of the best XP in the game. And until that point, you pretty much are going to be in there for a while.
All right, Knockback, what were you up to?
So I went from playing Good Intentions over and over and over again to find bugs to playing the other two quests over and over and over again to
find bugs.
Yeah.
The life of a dev.
Right. Some late nights here. Yep.
All right, we currently have 25 supporters on Patreon, and if you would like to help support DDO players, simply go to the donations page where you can support the Players Alliance on Patreon. There you'll find rewards, including a mention on the podcast of your choice, or even be a guest host with us here on DDO Players News. You could email us at podcast@ddoplayers.com, and you can also follow us at Twitter, the Players Alliance at Players Ally, DDO Players at DDO Players, Draculetta at Draculetta_72, and Pineleaf at Pineleaf Needles. And you can also join our Steam group. And you can follow us DDO at DDO Unlimited at DDO Unlimited, Turbine at Turbine, and the Twitch stream, DDO stream at http://twitch.com/tv/DDO stream. The Players Alliance has 4 live shows every Monday at 8:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. We have DDO Players News. Every Saturday at 8:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, we have Elotra Players News. Every other Saturday after Elotra Players News, we have Tales of the Free Folk. And on the last Friday of each month at 8:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, we have Elotra Academy After School. You join us for our live shows at ddoplayers.com/live. That is all for tonight, and this is Pineleaf Needles thanking our guests for being here this week and reminding you to quest responsibly.